There are two main styles of dovetails. Now, there are a lot of different types of dovetails. I mean, you have your, you have a through dovetail. You have a half blind dovetail. You can even do a full blind dovetail, a miter dovetail, a full blind miter dovetail. They even have starburst dovetails. You can do sliding dovetails, and if you are a fan of Roy Underhill, they even have the impossible dovetail. There are lots of different types of dovetails. But really, there's only two main styles of dovetailers. There's going to be that person that's going to cut a dovetail. They're going to sit back and examine it, and they're going to tell themselves that the entire value, the perceived value the general public is going to have on my craftsmanship ability, thus the existential value I have to the human race, is based upon the parallelism and the lack of vacancy inside my joinery. The general public is really going to exalt me to a high level plane based upon what they see. Now don't worry, I do have a video for that type of person coming up fairly shortly. But there's a lot of us out there that kind of recognize that dovetails are a utilitarian joint, something to slap two parts together really quickly. Most of the time they're not even going to be seen. It's maybe in a painted cabinet or a blanket chest, or maybe it's going to be behind molding on a cabinet, or drawers, really common use. They're in the back. Whoever looks at the back of a drawer, I bet the drawers in your kitchen right now have staples in them and you never even realize it. Maybe on the sides of the drawer people might recognize, oh, it's a dovetail. That's about it. But if you were to pull out a magnifying glass to look at them, well, this style of dovetailer is going to tell you, I'm sorry, IDFC, if it doesn't meet your cosmetic, superficial, filtered idea of what joinery should look like. This is something I built fast, efficiently, and it is going to serve generations to come. That's the type of person this video is for. Those people that want to learn how to do a fast, efficient, no measuring style of dovetailing. Now for this project, I'm just going to use some pine. This is just an example of a quick way to do dovetails. And since I started out with a short drawer, I'm going to kind of do it like I do a drawers. Typically on a drawer, I'm going to have a fairly thick front portion and a fairly thick back portion. And we're going to be doing a through dovetail, so I'm going to be working on the back corner of it. And I do this quite often because I just think the proportions look better. It's roughly a third of the thickness of this. And I like having a thicker board on back because a lot of times on the back of the board, I'll have the bottom of the drawer slide underneath it and protrude, and I'll put a screw underneath it that's kind of walled out. That will allow for a little bit of movement, plus the fact that I can adjust the door's depth by shaving this off a little bit. So if it's protruding a little bit, this will hit the back of it. So I can adjust, fractions of a millimeter how far in a drawer goes by how much I slice off of that. Think of it as a depth stop. Now the tools I use when I'm cutting a fast and efficient dovetail is obviously a dovetail coping saw and a marking knife and the ubiquitous 1/2-inch chisel. I also have a little moccasin vise to hold it. This is just construction lumber and some maple dowels I put threads on, and I tap the southern yellow pine here so it'll go in and out. Fairly simple setup. Now if you were to think it through, you would understand that you're going to be putting the tails, the angle portions, on the sides, because if you have a thick front and a thick back, the sides are pulling down on them, the thin ones. And I typically would do a through dovetail on the back of a drawer and a half blind dovetail on the front, because I personally don't want to see the dovetails on the face of a drawer. And if you want to get good at this, pick a project that has 7 or 8 drawers in it, maybe a small cabinet or a jewelry box or something like that, and do all the backs first, because you'll get a lot of practice on the backs with your sawing skills, and then when you do the fronts that are half blinds are actually a lot more forgiving, so you'll do a lot better job there. So we have to decide what side of this board to do my full blind dovetails. And yes, that is a thought process you want to do, because after you finish your dovetails, you're generally going to plane either the tails or pins smooth. And if the front of the drawer is more important than the back, you don't want tear out going this direction. So you want your planing to go uphill on this side of the board. So if you get tear out, it's on the back side where nobody's going to see it. Yeah, think it through from the very get-go. Now on this board, the grain is starting from the bottom and going towards the top. So by planing this way, it's going to be the smoothest. So I want to put my through dovetails on the back side here. So the first thing we're going to want to do is mark our dips. This board is obviously thinner than that board. So I want to mark this exact thickness. And normally that would require 2 marking gauges. But I'm going to be lazy and fast, and I'm just going to use my chisel. And notice I laid it down flat on this with the bevel pointing up, because if I put it on this edge right here, with the bevel ramping up, if I were to drag across this way, my force is going to want to push that chisel down, and that'll keep it flat against this board. And I can actually just glide it along and use the chisel itself as a marking gauge, making a nice straight line. Do that one on both sides because this is a through dovetail. But you don't have to do it on the top right there. That'll just leave more lines that you have to peel off, because we're going to be cutting the edges off of this one. And then repeat the process for this board. Lay it down on its side, place your chisel down, and mark your edge. Next up is putting it in my vise, or securing it however you want to do it. Now I have that little X right there, and that shows me that when I'm planing off of this end, I'm going against the grain. I want this to be the back. This is going to be the front, so planing it, whenever I plane it all smooth, that'll be the nice smooth side. So if there is any tear out, it'll be towards the back of it. And I want to put that towards me in my vise. I'm also not going to have it up a little bit high, because this is a fairly thin board. Up here, there's and vibration induction. I mean, it'll vibrate more. I want it way down low, because the lower it is, the more accurately my saw will work, because it's not fighting that vibration. Now, force of habit is I will come back and I will position it so it is parallel with the ground. And you can just eyeball this. Us humans are actually pretty good at determining straight up and down visually, because otherwise we'd be falling over all over the place. Just set back, kind of get it vibrate, and then tighten it up. Now my first cuts will always be from the edge. I'm going to come over a little bit. How much is determined how I'm attaching the drawer. If the drawer is going to be on a little ledge right here, I'm not going to worry about it, because I'm going to glue that ledge on. But if I've cut a groove along the bottom for it to slide into, then I want to make sure that I cut off the groove whenever I'm doing my dovetail. So no matter what I do, I want to space it so that groove is gone. If I'm not doing anything like that, I just don't worry about it. And for the first cut, I just come over however far I want. Now it is really easy to determine parallel. I mean offset. Now there is a trick where you can look into the reflection of the saw, and I'll show you that in a second. But for this first cut, I just come over, walk it over, get a certain distance over, make sure it's parallel, and then I make a slice straight across. No big deal. Now I want you to notice, after about 3 strokes, I've gone down a pretty consistent depth. And every saw is going to be a little bit different. You're going to get a feel for it. Maybe it's 2 strokes, maybe it's 4 strokes for you. But what I've found to be consistent on all my angles is after 3 strokes, I can actually just let the saw fall to one side or the other, kind of like that. And that'll give me a consistent angle that I like. And from there, I just saw down to my baseline. Find that angle, saw down. Right up. Now I do the same exact thing to the other side. Come over roughly the same distance, make your few strokes, 1, 2, 3, let it fall over a little bit, then saw down to that baseline. Now one of the aspects that shows quality craftsmanship is tail spacing, what looks good and what doesn't look good. And there's a lot of different tricks you can do with dividers and all that kind of stuff, but once again, we're using the no measure, fast, down and dirty, rude, crude method of making a dovetail. So we're not going to do any of that. And the example I'm doing is, roughly drawer thickness. Maybe a desk drawer, that kind of thickness. If you're doing bigger stuff, you can use what I'm about to show you as an example of what you can do without having to measure anything. Now, on that size drawer, I would typically put 2 dovetails in the back and maybe 3 or 4 in the front, maybe a little fancier in the front. The reason why I do 2 in the back is because if I screw up one, at least the other one will work, and you only need one of them to work. And what I do is well, first we've already done those 2 sides, now equal distance from the edge. That's a start. If I'm only doing 2, I will actually take my saw, I'll kind of eyeball the center, and I will make a knife line, just a line right in the center. And from there, I will come over an equal distance from that line to make those 2 cuts. The only thing I'm really concerned with is I want this distance right here to be more than a 1/2 inch because I'm too lazy to go find another size chisel. I've got a 1/2 inch right there at my workbench. But if you wanted to do more than that, maybe 3 or any higher number, if you're going more than 2, I would stick with an odd number. What I would do is I would probably come over an equal amount on both sides and cut those 2 side dovetails so that they look balanced. And then whatever's left over will become my center one. And that might be quite a bit bigger than the 2 outside ones, but because there's some symmetry to there, it will at least look nice. And that's generally how I would do it. I will get them equal on both sides and not worry about the center one. And that's why I would do odd numbers that way. So for this one, I'm only going to do 2 because it's on the back. So I kind of eyeball the center and I'll just take a stroke. That's going to be cut away anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to come over a certain distance. Now, how far is that distance? Well, I don't want to have to walk across a shop to get a different size chisel. So if you ever want to cheat, you can come over here, or I do it on this side, but just for the camera, and just kind of rock it back and forth to give you a dent. And that's how big you have to make the cutout for this chisel to work. So what do? I just kind of eyeball where that angle is going to be. I come over a little bit. I take my 3 strokes. I angle it and I saw down. Stop at the baseline. Come over an equal amount right over there. Take my 3 strokes. Angle it. Go down to the baseline. And there we go. I'm done. Next step up, grab my coping saw. I'm going to take it almost all the way down to that baseline, right there. Now, a lot of people will arc it from one corner down to the other, and then they will come back in and clean it up that way. Well, that's two movements. If I just go down to that baseline, I'm going to press sideways on my blade and then just get it moving. And that's basically using the set on the teeth to turn a slight triangle. Can you see that? And then I can just go straight across on that baseline. From there, pull it out, put it in sideways, and cut off those sides. Now, I accidentally forgot to mark a line across the top for me to follow, but I do have an indentation from this line coming up. I can just drop my fingernail in there, and that's one reason why whenever I know I'm going to be doing a lot of dovetailing, I leave this index fingernail a little bit long versus my normal really short. I can just drop it in there, slide it up, line it over on this side, and follow that line down. Next, it's just a matter of cleanup. Make sure your chisel is really sharp if you're using soft woods. And the closer you saw to your line, the easier it will be. Let me see if I can, that's as close as I can zoom in. So I'm just going to take the chisel halfway to the line and halfway down. I got really close there, so now I'm just going to drop it right in that line and go halfway down. I don't want to go all the way through the board, just halfway. Drop it in the line, halfway down. Now remember, this is the back. So the better you get here, the better the show side on the front will look out. Come through, halfway down. I'm going to go right in that line. Now if you want to take a bigger bite, you can always angle the chisel a little bit. And with a little bit of experience, you will determine how far out you can go. Because what's happening is, because there's air over here, as you chisel down, there's nothing here to press this way. But if you're to chisel in the middle of the board, the pressure on the blade is equal on both sides, so it will want to equalize that pressure, and it will move the chisel back one way or the other. So if you're taking a big bite and there's pressure on this side, well, by angling it a little bit, you can kind of equalize the pressure. But I don't have much wood on this side, so I'm just going straight down and take it all off. Now, if you don't have a super sharp chisel, what you end up with is a tad bit of blowout on the interior. No big deal, because the glue surface is on the sides, not the end grain. Now from there, you come right back over to your vise. You might have to readjust it for a thicker piece. Now, I'm going to do the side over here. Now, I'm going to have a, well, if I'm doing a front end, I definitely have a show side and a back side. If you're doing the inside of it, go ahead and plane it smooth, because this might be the last time you touch that. And don't worry about the outside. This one right here is at the back of it, so I don't really matter. So I'm going to drop it down into my vise. Now, once again, I built this little thing right here, and it's just the same exact size of this, so I can rest whatever piece I have. And make it flush with whatever you're doing. That's one reason why I really like this moccasin, because I have about 1.5 inches of wood that's nice and parallel here. Come back over, I can drop it down, grab my knife. I definitely prefer a knife versus a pencil here, and transfer the lines. This is not measuring, it's just transferring what already exists. Now the key thing is, when you transfer your lines, you want to press pretty hard because you want it pretty dented in. And the trick is you want those dents to stay. Now remember, I had wood here. I want this to stay, so if I were to marking on the outside of this, making that knife line, then that knife line is part of the wood that's coming up. So I just want to remove this, so I'm not taking the line, I'm not splitting the line, I'm leaving the line and removing everything right up to it. Step back, make sure it's dead on vertical before you tighten up your workbench, and that is incredibly important at this point in time. Not so much at the first one, but it's a good practice to get into, because now you're going to be using gravity in your favor. Pick up the saw and let's get to work. Now this is the waste side, so if I were to drop my fingernail into that knife line, basically I would be sawing on my good side. So at this point in time, I'm actually going to be using the fat of my finger to control where this is. So I kind of squeeze it right there, and I roll my finger back to get it in there. That way I can roll it forward to sneak up on that line. And I'm going to start on this far side by lifting up my handle and just sawing right on that line, but not taking it. Bring it back, and once I get going, I'm going to balance my saw. You see, one of the advantages of back saw is it carries its weight up high, and it's kind of like balancing a broom on your hand. With the weight up high, it's easier to balance. So if I can just get it to a nice balance point right there, I know I'm going to be plumb, at which point I will saw straight down to the line on this side, and then right it up. Now, I don't really care if I go past the line a little bit on this side, because that's the interior. I'm sawing on the exterior. If I just meet the line there visually, it'll be okay. Then it's just a matter, on this side, here's a waste side, so I can drop my fingernail into that knife line, creates a little bit of a buffer, come down, saw down to the line, right it back up, come back over, move my fat of my finger to line it up just perfectly, saw across the top, find that balance, come down, and come over. Now really, this is such a short distance, if I was a little bit off on that balance, it really wouldn't matter that much. Now from there, I'm just going to chop it out this time to show you that you don't have to saw it out. And I did just re-hone the chisel blade because it was really dull the last time. So I'm going to come halfway to that line and chop halfway down. Halfway to the line, chop halfway down. If you hold the chisel down by like a pencil, you can go a little bit quicker rather than holding up top where it's harder to aim. Halfway down. Now here's a little trick. See how I've cut halfway down, it's flown away. If I were to cut halfway exactly the same spot on the other side, it will break off. So what I do is on the other side, I go a little, just a fraction more than halfway and chop down. Remember, you're going to have to chop at an angle. Just a tad bit more than halfway and chop down. And notice it doesn't crack off and break away there because the bottom was supporting it a little bit more from the top. So flip it back over, halfway to the line, halfway down. And it gets easier the closer to the line you get. Now, as you do this, you have to remember, the wider side is going to be the show side. Most people are not going to see the interior. So I like to do, on the last chop, the wide side first. So I'll come in, I'm just going to drop it right into that line. I've done this long enough to know that that's just enough that I can get away with doing that. Go halfway down, and that will leave me a very crisp line in case there is any blowout. The blowout will happen on the inside. Flip it, chop out the rest, and you're almost done. Now the last thing I like to do is I will grab my marking gauge, and because I have fairly wide tails and pins, I'm going to use that interior corner, not the tip, the interior corner. I can leverage against it to kind of whittle away any kind of schmutz I see in there. It doesn't take but a few seconds. Generally it's one swipe and everything comes off. And if I see anything like maybe I missed my line a little bit, I can carve it off. Now I do know some people will come into this interior corner right here, right there, and shave it away, but on soft pine I don't really feel that's a big deal. So right now all that's left is to grab a metal hammer and let's test it out. And why metal, do you ask? Well, you can actually hear if it's a little bit too tight with the metal. With the rubber one, it kind of doesn't give you much of a feel. So listen. See, it's a little tight on this side, but this side's fitting perfect. Can you hear that difference? So just before I hammer it down, I just want to check to make sure what's going on. Oh, there's a little bit of schmutz right there. Just going to take care of that. So there we go. Get it positioned after you get rid of the smudge. Now, yep, I can hear a difference. And there we go. Pretty nice tight joint. Holds its own weight. So let's plane it smooth and see what the results are. Once again, I like my little spacer right there because it just gives me a little support. I can drop it right down there. It maintains it nice and straight. Clamp it down. Smooth it out. Just plane it long enough to get your end grain lined up there. And if you want, you can plane it enough to remove the lines, but I don't mind the lines myself. And you're going to be doing the other side, so don't worry about making this perfectly smooth, but here we go. End results. Gap isn't too bad on this side. It could probably be a little bit better on that side, but no big deal. Playing that down. If you're using hide glue, little hide glue sawdust, that would cover it up, but there you go. Now it holds its own weight, so I consider that a fairly good joint, and it'll work with a little bit of glue for generations. Now some of y'all might be out there saying that, hey, he just cuts these a lot, he has a lot of experience with it. Really, I mean, this is the end of January. The last 4 or 5 months out of the year, I am pretty much at the lathe constantly trying to make stuff to sell during the holiday season. The beginning of January, I'm out harvesting trees so that at the end of next year, I will have wood dry enough that I can actually make stuff for the holiday season. I can honestly say I probably have not cut a hand joint in 4 or 5 months, and this was the first one I did in that long a time. It isn't a touch or feel, because I've lost those a long time ago. It's just understanding some basic concepts and steps to making cuts. Letting the machinery and physics do all the work for you. And if your joint is tight, I mean not very tight, or you got big gaps, I don't know, maybe it's all wiggly and gloopy, so bad that it won't hold its own weight anymore. I mean, as that bad? Well, there are even tips and techniques you can use to fix them. And that'll be in an upcoming video. After I do the more snobby style dovetails, I'll break that one too and have a video on how to fix your dovetails. Ugh, so bad. Well, if you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor. Like, favorite, subscribe, do all those social medias, tell your friends. Visit my website, wortheffort.com, where I write a fairly frequent blog. I'm starting a newsletter. I also have an online store where I sell not only my own woodworking, but some swag, such as t-shirts, hats, and there are links to other ways you can patronize us, and all those really do help subsidize buying material and offsetting time costs of making these videos for you. And at the end, I want you to remember one last thing, that it is always worth the effort to learn, create stuff, and share it with others. Y'all be safe and have fun.